All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Veterans Club podcast. This is Jeffrey Rosales, alongside my co-host Lakeisha Mosley and Joe Palacios. Today, we're going to have a very important and very inspiring conversation with a gentleman who has served over 36 years in the United States Marine Corps, Major General retired Juan Ayala. He is currently the Director of Military Veteran Affairs for the Department for the City of San Antonio. In this capacity, he serves as the city's liaison to the military, supporting the mayor, city council, and city departments. He works closely with military and civilian partners to ensure military missions and installations continue to thrive and grow in the region. He was also the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's CEO, as their CEO for an interim period during the COVID pandemic. Prior to his retirement, Major General Ayala commanded all 24 Marine Corps installations worldwide and was selected to lead the Department of Defense's 2015 Warrior Games. He was also the former IG, Inspector General of the Marine Corps, and his service includes forward combat tours in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, to include a year as a senior advisor of military transition team embedded with the 1st Iraqi Army Division. His previous assignments includes coordinating humanitarian assistance program throughout all of Africa, Eastern Europe. He also served as the Chief of Staff for the United States Southern Command, leading very important national security objectives and including coordination with law enforcement. And he's a very decorated Marine who just celebrated his birthday. Major General Juan Ayala, welcome to the Veterans Club.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
So I heard you celebrated a birthday. Is that true?
We did. We had the ball a little early, but November is our birthday month, and so we had the 8th annual citywide City of San Antonio Marine Corps Ball. We had about 600 folks there. We've had up to 1,000 folks, and we celebrated every year since, except for COVID year. But every year we have a waiting list. It depends on the venue and the availability. It's all volunteers. But what I like about our ball, it is a real Marine Corps, full-bodied, everybody is there. So we had a great combination of civilians, veterans, other services. We had our wounded warriors there. We had 4th Recon, reservists, active duty. And, of course, our youngest guy was, 18 years old or 17 years old, I believe. And our oldest guy was 100 years old, because we also celebrate a veteran. And I have the honor of escorting our guest of honor. We had a guest of honor, Justin Cavernall, who is a Marine Corps vet, Purple Heart recipient, grunt, and he's an actor, and he has also has been on the Naked and Afraid show a couple of times, and he's an up and coming guy. Had a great speech. And it was great. The 100-year-old guy was incredible. We gave him his cake, and he was in tears. And it's very emotional, as you can tell. All our ceremonies, and you all know this, they're the same, but they're all different. And I remember, God, that young Marine, 18 years old, I didn't know whether to shake his hand or burp him, but he was just, it was just an incredible ceremony.
And that's part. And for those of you listening here, right? So in the military, we all celebrate our foundings. The Marine Corps' founding is on 10 November 1775. As some of you know, we are very big on tradition and service. And the general here in San Antonio celebrated with their staff. And it is, I think, something that all Marines, whether active duty or afterwards, it is something we always honor, because we're all about honoring tradition and service here. Sounds like Joe had a comment.
No, I did. I actually, the idea of the military being so small, I actually know Justin Governor. We went to college together. We were actually president and vice president of the Veterans Club at Saddleback College in California. Great guy, like a Marine sniper, like just amazing dude. Very funny. And yeah, you're right. Like the Naked and Afraid shows. If you guys haven't got a chance to see that, I recommend watching a rerun. There's some great scenes of the resiliency of service members in a place like that. Pretty cool. So
yeah, he was great. He was hilarious, and he was a little nervous because our audience had very elderly and at all ages. And he comes up to me and he says, can I drop one F-bomb? And I go, okay, sure. And he did, and it was funny.
Yeah, and Marines, I tell you what, man, that is something we have to adjust in our transitions, especially when we get to the corporate world, because I've had a few interesting conversations, let's say at least with the HR folks. But I digress. General, so real quick, I do want to dive in a little bit onto your background. I think it's a very important part of your story and your legacy, especially this legacy that you are leaving us with honor and integrity and all the values of the Marine Corps. So let's talk about what your background. So where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born in El Paso, Texas, but I lived the first 6 years of my life in Juarez, in Mexico. My parents were both from Mexico, and I was born there, but then we lived in Juarez, and for the first 6 years. My father worked at Fort Bliss as a dishwasher, and my mother stayed at home. And so at around that age, around 6, they moved to El Paso, where my dad continued to work as a dishwasher. I went to first grade. I flunked first grade. I didn't speak a word of English. And what my parents did, what all parents do, and this is such a common story, they sent me to Head Start, which is a great program. And I remember being in Head Start for an entire summer. And then, of course, I got my language was fluent enough. And then I finished out and then went to high school. But during the time that I was raised, I worked at my dad's restaurant. I had a little restaurant for 30 years where he raised all 9 of us, actually. And I started peeling potatoes when I was 6, and I did everything. I waited on tables. I cooked. I did his books when I was in college because I was a business major. And I think I was telling you that as the oldest of 9, my father came to me and he said, I want you to take over the restaurant. You're the oldest. And I go, Dad, I'm going to do something easier. I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And so I did. I went to college. He said, look, I'll pay for your college. I said, Dad, you can't afford it. He said, just go. And so I went to school, and the first thing I did, the first month of the first semester, I went to the recruiting officer and signed up for the platoon leaders class program. And then I was commissioned in 1979. I was going to do 6 years. I loved the Corps, and 36 years later, I still miss it.
We all do. And I'm curious, General, so what drove you to join the Marine Corps? You mentioned your dad had worked on one of the bases, but was there like an influence? Were your friends joining or some of your classmates? Like, what was going on during that time? Because we're talking post-Vietnam era, right? Getting ready for the Reagan-Bush era. So, like, that was almost quote-unquote peacetime, if you will. But I'm just curious why you decided to join, especially the Marine Corps, right? Which was one of the easier tasks, like you said.
Well, I missed the draft by a year, but I always wanted to serve, and the reason being is because my father was very proud of being Mexican and being Mexico. He, as a matter of fact, he never got his citizenship. I mean, he was here legally, but he never got his citizenship, and he was just very, very proud of that. But he also was very proud of the fact that I spoke English. I mean, that's he would tell his customers, my son speaks English. He spoke it too, but not very well. He said, but he was very proud of the fact that this country had given us these opportunities, had given him this opportunity, and given him the opportunity to make a better life for my mom and for the nine of us. But I always wanted to serve. And I recall, and you mentioned Vietnam, a lot of his customers ended up going to Vietnam. A lot of the sons of his customers ended up going to Vietnam. And I remember watching them come home. I knew them when they were a bunch of knuckleheads or they were just teenagers. And then when they come back, unrecognizable, squared away, respectful, disciplined. And I would hear their stories. And I said, you know what? I want to be a Marine. And that happened when I was in the 4th or 5th grade. And that was my goal. I put it in my mind, and I was going to enlist. And of course, my father talked me into going to college, which was great, but I still ended up in the Marine Corps.
That's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that, because a lot of folks have different reasons. A lot of them are economic, some of them are very patriotic, and some of them are a mixture of between the two. So you got into the Corps, you did over 36 years. What were some of your highlights, and what are some of your maybe lessons learned, and maybe any mentors that kind of guided you on the way? Because, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, um, making it to the flag officer ranks is very, very. There's only a 1% or probably 2%. That's it. Not many people make it into those ranks, and for you to achieve such a high, distinguished rank, that's an incredible accomplishment. But we would definitely love to hear a little more kind of your experiences as far as what the Corps taught you.
Well, I had never left El Paso, and so I went to Officer Kennedy School in Quantico, Virginia. And I think, from what I recall, I was the only Hispanic in that 70-person platoon. It was one African American and me. So it was intimidating for me. El Paso's 60-70% Hispanic. So for me, it was a new environment, and I didn't know what to expect. The drill instructors were all Vietnam veterans. And they, at the time, this was 1976 when I went to the program, they weren't very kind to anybody, but they were, for me, they picked on me. And so that was a challenge for me. But my father taught me that you never quit. And I made up my mind that no matter, and they did, he would call me all kinds of names, which I'm not going to repeat. And well, I tell you what, he did. He called me chief the entire time. He thought I was a Native American. He thought I was an Indian. And he called me chief. And finally, after about 7 weeks, I got the guts to tell him. I said, Sergeant Instructor, I am not an Indian. He said, well, what the F are you? He said, I'm Mexican. And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, Jesus Christ. So you killed Davy Crockett in the Alamo? And so, that's the kind of stuff that, that they would tease you with. And of course, I ended up digging a hole for about an hour. So, that's the kind of subtle and not so subtle things that I had to go through. I remember when I was a young captain, this was when we waited for results from our promotions on a fax machine. And I'm standing around. I'm the only Hispanic, of course, as a company commander, and this is at Camp Pendleton in the 80s. The faxes come out for the rank of major promotion. And of course, my last name, Ayala, I was the first one on it. Happy as hell. And I recall that one of the guys next to me, a guy from Iowa, I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, well, I guess you made the minority quota. And so those are the kinds of subtle and not subtle things that, fortunately, I was pretty big for being a Mexican, and they didn't pick on me too much. But those are the kinds of things that I remember, but they didn't affect me to where I wasn't going to do my job. One of the things that I was taught working in that restaurant, one of the things that I was taught being in the band was discipline and a work ethic. And I think that one thing, I remember my dad telling me, he says, look, don't ever forget who you are. And don't ever forget that what we are good at is fighting and working. And so, and we worked hard. So that's that work ethic, I think. The other thing I can tell you about other challenges is when I took the SAT, I didn't do very well. And I recall, man, I must be a real dumb guy. But it doesn't measure your heart, doesn't measure your mind. It doesn't measure your effort. And in Spanish, of course, your ganas. It doesn't measure any of that. And I recall that I came in as a probationary student in school, and I said, just give me a chance. I told the counselor. She didn't want to. And I came back the next day, just give me a chance. And she did. And I graduated and did well. And one other incident I'll never forget. So I had done really well. I was a major now, and I was selected to go to Command and Staff College, the Army's Command and Staff College, which is hard for a Marine to go to be selected to, in Leavenworth, Kansas. So I check in, and they give you a test. And the test is to test, they want to see your aptitude at reading and comprehending, speaking, and writing. And I recall I took the test, and I didn't do well on the test. I'm not a test taker. And I remember the lieutenant colonel comes to me, and he says, the counselor comes to me, and says, I don't think you're going to make it through this course. I don't think that you probably don't have the writing skills. And it was a true false. It was one of those tests. So I said, look, I'm not going to quit, and I'm going to go through the course. So a year later, I graduated from the course, and they had published about 3 of my articles that I'd written, and I had done very well in the course. And so my my lesson and what I tell folks is that tests don't tell you everything. And we are not very good sometimes at taking these tests. And don't let anybody ever tell you no. That's my attitude that I had. I never got passed over for a promotion until I got to the ranks of general. And I recall I made it on my third try. Now, I stayed in because I love the Marine Corps. And like you were saying, you don't do it for the money. But boy, did but I earned it. And a lot of folks have this unconscious bias. When I walk in a room, they say, well, he made it because his last name ends in an A or some crap like that. Not true. I think we have to work harder, I think, to get where we're at. And that's one thing that I really think we do by and large. I mean, I've worked with a lot of Marines and all services. I mean, I've had 4 joint tours, so I've been around, believe it or not. So, but anyway, that's some of the challenges that I had. And I'm very proud of the fact that I wish my father would have been alive to see me where I got to.
I think we just need to let that breathe for a little bit, because those are some very inspiring things. What I'm hearing is, despite some of these things being undermined, you use that as fuel to make yourself even better and more resilient, right? And I do remember my own story is in high school. I think I had like a 1.5 GPA. One of my teachers was like, hey, you should probably join the Navy, and said, are you sure you want to join the Marine Corps? I was like, no, I'm joining the Marine Corps. And I ended up almost failing one of the toughest courses I ever took, which is being a teacher's assistant for my PE teacher, because I never went. I was too busy getting distracted by other important meetings from the opposite. And so anyway, I do remember some of those challenges, like you were saying, and I use those as fuel, because I love it when someone undermines it. Because when you show up in your work ethic, which I got from my father, I think that speaks for itself. But also, I think learning the language of communication, right, which is what you were also alluding to, General, is how to communicate and brand yourself and market yourself to say you are capable of doing a lot of these things. So I think it's very inspiring, and I think there's a lot more lessons to be learned on how to navigate that. Because I think one of the things, General, is some people get stuck on the navigation side, right? Maybe they hear a comment or feedback and then it just hits them. But, we use that as a way to fuel yourself, because if you know yourself internally, it doesn't matter what someone says outside of you. But I think there's a disconnect there.
Yeah. Well, it's I like to say this: our business, no matter what it is, isn't personal. It's intensely personal. And I think once people get to know you and understand you, it doesn't matter what you look like at all. And that was one of the things. I joined the Corps to get out of El Paso. Nothing wrong with El Paso now, but I just wanted to get out of there. And I ended up either being stationed at or TDY or TAD or whatever at around 60 countries altogether in my career. And one thing that I learned is, people are more alike than they are different. And I had some great experiences. I mean, you talked about, I lived with the Iraqi Army for a year as an advisor. You talk about a change in cultures, and you talk about having to engage and having to get along with folks and be approachable and all those things. Those are really important. And I think we learned that at the very beginning. And boy, I tell you, that work ethic really goes a long way.
Yes, it does. I do want to pitch it over here to any of my co-hosts. Lakeisha, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes. I want to say to you, General, thank you so much for everything you are and your resilience. And, I believe that came very, very young, to be able to persevere and to not give up on your goal, and you made it happen. So my question to you is, what resources do you have to share to others who want to get to that end goal as well? Because most people give up.
Yeah, no, I tell this to everybody. I'm at the rank that I got to, and that I achieved on the backs and shoulders of a lot of folks that are nameless, faceless, that, you just don't think about until it's done. I mean, I think back and think, God, I walked past all these young lance corporals, or I walked past all these young lieutenants. And I mean, you get to where you're at because of them. And I think one of the things that I learned early on is that support you get from your family, and that support you get from your the ones that you work with. And they're not all generals. I mean, the reason that I think that I got to where I got achieved was I listened to my staff NCOs, and I had some great staff NCOs. And the good staff NCOs not only know how to lead their enlisted, they know how to lead their officers. And I had some staff NCOs that were just tremendous. So I think it's important not only that we recognize that we acknowledge them and we bring them up with us. I learned that early on. The other thing I think is I had a very, very strong family unit. My wife and I were married. So 1979 was a heck of a year for me. I graduated from college. I got married. I was commissioned in the Marine Corps, and first duty station was Okinawa. So that was a heck of a year. So I married my wife in 1979, and she's still with me, believe it or not. We moved 23 times in 36 years. And along the way, we had 4 children, and I was deployed a lot. I mean, I did 4 one-year tours the last 8 years of my career, and I was gone a lot during my career. And inevitably, something would break. Inevitably, one of the kids got in trouble. Inevitably, and she was with me the entire time. So that family support is tremendous. And if I didn't have it, I don't know where I'd be. The other thing, too, is Marine support. You got a Marine family. I think Marines, by and large, and this is not throwing shade on any other services, but I tell you, we stick together. And whether I recall that when I was at Camp Pendleton, we had those wildfires out there, those Pendleton fires, and I recall that at housing or on the base, I mean, we were out for each other. It just didn't matter. And of course, when you're deployed, and Joe and Jeff, you know what I'm talking about, is the one on your left and the one on your right, and it's all about that. So that's the kind of resources I think that we need to use. And they're right next to us. It's our families, it's our fellow Marines.
Wow, thank you so much, General. I appreciate that. We are all together. We need each other. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very, so I'm sure you guys probably know this, but there's a saying that says one team, one fight. And what the general's alluding to here, right? And so if there's a way we can have a shared mission together and we're in this together, camaraderie actually leads to more better recruitment, retention, and readiness in the service and for also in the business world here. So I think Marines are just really good at doing that and executing on the mission and the vision, or, for those still in the service, called commander's intent, right? So fair. So I think that's just something you guys can take away here, what we're talking about. So Jenna, were there any mentors that guided you? Because I mean, I can imagine, right, being the first, but there had to have been some type of mentors or someone that was an ally that kind of took you under their wings and kind of showed you a roadmap. Because right now you were building the airplane and flying it, but there was really not a roadmap of being the first, right? So anything you want to share there?
Yeah, I again, a lot of my mentors. There was a staff sergeant when I was a second lieutenant in Okinawa that I don't recall what I did, but he took me aside and he said, "Hey, sir, you really stepped on your sword." And I go, "What does that mean?" Anyway, and then he said, he was very respectful, and he said, "Look, this is what you need to do." And Staff Sergeant Grant was his name, and I'll never forget him. And I remember that he made sure that he would pull me aside. He didn't, fortunately, have to pull me aside too much. So I remember that. And staff NCOs are such an important part of our careers, and it's such an important, they're the backbone. They're the backbone of the Corps. I mean, I don't care what anybody says, they're the backbone of the Corps. And I'll never forget him. And then when I was a young captain, I recall, and the reason I was able to write so well at that school that I told you about, when I was a young captain, I remember working for a major by the name of Mark Lott. And Mark Lott eventually retired as a major general. And I was at the 1st FSSG at the time. And I recall he said, "You need to write me a point paper." I can't remember what it was anymore. I sent it to him, sent it back, corrected, all read, sent it back. This happened about 7 times. I was so upset. I wanted to choke him. And but what it taught me, and I'll never forget him, is that is so important, the way you communicate. And this was back when we didn't have computers. This is back when we didn't have internet. This is back when it was just written stuff. But you know what? I think when I talk to young Marines or when I talk to folks who go in, especially young officers or staff NCOs, writing is just so important. So that mentor was really good. And that really, the writing, speaking, the communications part, that was very important. So I'll never forget him, Mark Lott, and Staff Sergeant Grant. I'll never forget either one of those guys. So those are my mentors. As I got up through the ranks, I remember I had a sergeant major by the name of Danny DeSorels. And so I'm a squadron commander now at this point, a lieutenant colonel. And that guy just, he really mentored me. He really said, because that was my first time in command. I had 800 folks in that squadron. And I remember talking to him all the time about anything that came in. And it was just important. And one of the things I learned early on is leadership, not only through example, but by walking around. And that, I saw that in some of my early leaders. And I think that is very, very important. You need to be seen. You need to be present. And you have to have a good presence, but you need to be seen and you need to be approachable. I'm not saying you're on first name basis, buddy, but you need to be approachable. And I tell this, I teach a class at Bethesda, Maryland. About 7 or 8 times a year, they fly me up there. I teach a leadership and ethics class. And these are all young Navy officers and senior Navy enlisted that are getting ready to deploy with Marines or getting ready to go out to the fleet. That's one of the things I tell them. You have to be able to mentor your officers and if they don't ask you for mentoring, that's their fault. That's bad on them. But you have to be seen. You have to be present. There are just so many examples I can give of folks not doing that. And, you just can't stay in your office.
Joe, any comments?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, sir. Like I used to always, I was actually lucky enough to have good staff NCOs when I first started and good officers, and that worked well together, doing exactly what you were talking about. Like this, I never saw any conflict between my lieutenant, platoon commanders, company commanders, and then their enlisted advisors. And I think that actually was very helpful for me in understanding when I became a staff NCO. Right? It's like it really is like almost a response. And this is speaking from the enlisted side. It almost becomes a responsibility to make sure that if you have a lieutenant come in and you're a staff NCO, it's almost your responsibility to make sure that he's successful, because that's the guy that's going to look out for your enlisted sides anyway. Like he's the one that's going to go to bat for you. So it's always good to, and I love that you did that. I had a question back when you were going through, and you came up with some of those roadblocks, because I've always noticed that, and I'd like to hear you talk to it. Were there systems in place that help kind of avoid those roadblocks? And I think the importance of those systems, like making sure that you understand your fitness reports, you know how to communicate what you were just talking about. Were there any other systems in there that kind of help overcome roadblocks that you can share? And this is just I think it's good for people in the civilian world to hear, because I think that one of the important things about bridging that gap is understanding how military personnel accomplish missions, right? I think there's a misconception that you just tell us what to do and then that's it. But that's not necessarily true. It's about commander's intent and all that. So I'd you elaborate a little bit of that, because I think that helps bridge the gaps.
That's a great question. Of course, there's the formal rules and regulations about, what can you do legally and not legally. But I think especially on fitness reports and other things, but I think to understand your question better. So all the legal rules and regulations and directives are in place for those roadblocks not to exist. For me, people not telling you overtly being discriminatory or all these other things. But what I think is important is that when I heard, especially in my younger years in my career, when I heard something like, you made the minority quota or anything like that, you got to speak up. And how you inculcate that, how you put that into our young Marines or even our civilians, because I see it out here in the civilian world, that's hard. That's hard to do. But everything is in place, Joe. But it's just people. Some people are just afraid to speak up. And one of the things that we've done here lately, right before I retired from the Marine Corps, is we tried to change that. And a good example is if you have something, you come back from the war and something's going on, it's not a weakness to state it, because it used to be that if you stated it, you're done. You're done. And so those are some of the roadblocks. The other thing I think is very important is the power of your personal example. I remember when I was a second lieutenant, I worked in the brig at Camp Victorious in Okinawa. And I remember I had a Vietnam limited duty officer, and I'll never forget, you never forget what they tell you. I forgot what the hell the guy looks like, but you never forget how they made you feel, right? You've heard that before. And I remember I was in the brig, and one day he walks in hungover, and he says to me, if we didn't have all these Mexicans, Africans, Puerto Ricans, this brig would be empty. And I was a second lieutenant. He's a major. I don't know what to say, but I'll never forget that. And I remember I got the courage to say, well, I'm an American. And so that, I think, is something that is changing. And I saw it changing through the years. And I think it eliminates some of those roadblocks. But, you're always going to have them, Joe. You're always going to have them. I saw them when I was in the Pentagon. And I tell you what I really saw. I was the Inspector General of the Marine Corps for a year. And I saw all the things that can happen and all the roadblocks that are there. One of the things that I advocated for, as I was the only Hispanic general officer for a while. And so they picked me for every darn board you can think of, promotion board. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what? This is what we should do. And I think the Marine Corps is doing it now. Take the pictures out of the darn promotions. I don't want to see what you look like. It doesn't matter. Yeah. What you did is what matters. In the civilian world, I've advocated to take the names out, because some of the names are very ethnic, and for some reason HR will stick them at the bottom of the pile, and that's BS. You look at the qualifications. So those are the types of roadblocks, and some organizations are starting to do that. Those are some of the things I think that the Marine Corps is starting to do, and I think our corporate world should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like I said, it's just a testament of the work ethic and what you're doing. You meet the qualifications or exceed them, and I think that's always what I always noticed was a lot of my peers, ethnic peers, they really try to really be 100, 300 PFTers, perfect rifle scores, get their PFTs up, CFTs up, like every metric covered, so that you don't worry about those roadblocks, because there's no roadblock. Like you can't question the work, and you can't question that they meet the requirements. And I love that. The second part of the question, though, and it's only because you had mentioned it earlier, and it was about how do we bridge the gap, and how do we really kind of show how to bring veterans into civilian organizations and have them successful. I have always thought that one of the things is there's just a miscommunication on how we get our missions and tasks in the civilian world. Like I think if you tell a veteran, do X, Y, Z, they're going to do X, Y, Z. Now, if you intended for them to do X, Y, Z to accomplish, 1, 2, 3, then they know, well, what if Z doesn't accomplish 1, 2, 3? They need to know what they're trying to accomplish. And I think there is the breakdown in communication. And it's a big thing that I've always remembered. It's just commander's intent. Yeah. What is the intent of what you're telling me to do? Because if I know the intent, because in the military, unlike the civilian world, there's no such thing as, oh, I can't do the job. In the civilian world, I've noticed that there is a lot of, oh, we can't do that. And
yeah, no, that's a great question. And my personal experience is that when we get a tasking from our civilian leadership, and when the military guys, when we're told in my department to do it, or any department, I mean, we go above and beyond, and we think beyond the actual words. Clean the window. Well, we think above and beyond that. So we clean the windowsill, the door. You know what the intent is. The problem, I think, is that that is not common out in the civilian in our civilian world. And so, again, the work ethic comes into it. But I don't see anything. And I've been with the city now for 9 years. I work with corporations, and of course, I was with the Hispanic Chamber, which I saw a lot of corporations and a lot of businesses. But they're very focused and very siloed, and you can't break that. Now, one of the things that I have seen with veterans when they transition out, and I think I was telling Jeffrey that just to give you my example, there's 13,000 employees in the city of San Antonio. About 1,800 of them are veterans. And I'm the senior veteran in the city. And so, we talk to veterans all the time. They come in the office sometimes for, some mentoring, and sometimes just the vent. But I get so many veterans coming in, and he says, these damn civilians and these GD civilians and blah, blah. I said, whoa, wait a minute. We joined the city. The city did not join us. And so we have to adapt. And I think that's one of the advice I give. We have to adapt. Now, we're not going to do anything illegal, immoral, and all that, but we really do have to adapt. But also, I said, don't ever, forget what you learned in the military, because that's always applicable. And if it goes above and beyond, so what? I'll give you an example. Respect. They're never on time. Nothing ever starts on time. In any of these 9 years, nothing's ever started on time. We're there on time. The first meeting that I went to, the mayor, and I escort the mayor to the Pentagon twice a year. So I'm very close to these senior guys. I would never run for office, but yes, I'm very close to these senior guys because they're part of my job. But I remember I was in a room full of folks, and the mayor was going to talk to us. He walks in the room, and it's a huge room. And what do Marines do? I stood up. I was the only one in the room that stood up. And I'm looking around thinking, this is the mayor of the 7th largest city in our nation. This is the mayor. And I remember a real old lady looked at me, and she says, hey, the bathroom's over there. I said, no, that's not why I'm standing up. So those are the cultural things I think that we need to get used to. We had our time in the Marine Corps. We had our time in the service. And I get asked all the time, do you miss it? I go, yeah, I miss it. But it's somebody else's turn. Now we have to adapt to the culture that we're put into. If not, we're not going to do well. But if we do carry, and I talked to a bunch of folks yesterday, actually, it was at Veterans Court. They had all gotten in trouble for misdemeanors, and they had all gone through a program. And that's one of the things I told them. I said, look, we have to adapt to what is out here. And I think to be successful, you have to get it in your mind. There's great civilians, there's great civilian leaders. It's just, we just have to understand it. And there's also knuckleheads that are going to tell you that, you made the minority quota. There's also that. There's probably more of that out here than there is in the military.
So real quick on that, great question, Joe. Thank you. I want to just give Lakeisha kind of the floor as well after this. But I think the language here, General, needs to change, because a lot of times when we get out, I've been there where you're still talking that Marine Corps lingo, and HR pulls you aside, says, no, Jeff, we don't drop F-bombs here, right? Or, you sent a very aggressive email, Jeff. And I said, no, I just gave them an instruction and said, this is how you get the job done, right? And that was a very tough transition for me, because when I got to the corporate world, the business world, they don't talk like we do. There's a more double speak. It's a little more subtle, and you have to understand, okay, who am I talking to? Who is my audience here, right? And now I'm starting to realize it went from task, mission to relationship based. Now it's building these relationships with, like, what are their goals? What are our goals? How can we meet in the middle? But I think that's been a tough transition for a lot of veterans. But I think the Marine Corps has a very tough time doing that, right? Because once a Marine, always a Marine. So how can we kind of bridge that gap to kind of teach them the business side. Because I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, there's over, former Secretary Ray Mabus said that, right? Former Secretary of the Navy. He said there's been over 100 CEOs that are Marines, and most of them were enlisted, right? So Marines have those great skills, those soft skills, leadership skills, right? Because I'll tell you what, I remember in one of my corporate experiences, somebody said, Jeff, leadership is not a skill. I said that it is a skill. Look at corporate America, right? Retention is a major challenge in attrition. And I think if you had better leadership development programs, I think there would be a major opportunity for you to improve your retention, recruitment, and the readiness of your organization. But I think there's some challenges, right, in learning that language. What have you guys done in your experience now, kind of seeing things on the outside to improve that language, especially for those that are transitioning out?
Is that?
Yeah, that's for you, General.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. First of all, you're right. We're acronym full. And so one of the things that I tell folks is that, this is the United Nations. It's not the Marine Corps. We have to get along with everybody. And our organizations are not, my experience, my organizations my organization, they're very much flat. The leadership is flat. Anybody can talk to the city manager. Anybody can talk to the mayor. They don't have to go through different levels by and large. And so you have to understand also that, we're not, they get the drill instructor mind in them. And you can't do that in the civilian world. You can't point fingers and do what we can't do knife hands or anything like that out there. First of all, they don't understand it. But I think that the other thing too, I think and I tell this to veterans all the time, civilians sometimes are intimidated by the fact that you're a veteran. They're intimidated because you're older. They're intimidated because of the way you carry yourself, and they're intimidated because of how you speak. And they're also intimidated, or they try to ignore you because they don't understand your acronyms, or they don't understand what the hell you're saying. And so my advice to them all the time is, and I go back to our world isn't personal, it's intensely personal, is your interpersonal relations are so important, not only in the Marine Corps, but interpersonal relations are the key, in my opinion, to being successful. And interpersonal relations means you don't burn bridges, no matter how much you like or dislike somebody is number one. And that's all. And believe me, there's a lot of conflict out here in some of these organizations because they're all in competition. But we tell them not to burn bridges, and also to get rid, if you can, of speaking like you're speaking to another Marine or you're speaking to another member of the service, because that is how I've done it. So when I send something up to leadership in writing, everything that's military, I spell it out. And then if I have to explain it, I explain it. Milcon is a good example, military construction, I have to explain it. But because I work a lot with the military here in San Antonio, but we really have to do that, and we really have to break it down. They have to see us not as veterans, but they have to see us as veterans, if you know what I mean. It's just, and I have an issue. I have a real problem sometimes with the way veterans are perceived. Oh, you're all broken. You're all this. You're all that. That's garbage. That is garbage. We're not. The other problem I have is that they niche us into, you can only do military stuff, or you can only do this. No, we can do a lot of things. And I think, again, that work ethic, and if we can prove that we do windows more than what we're capable, or more than they think we're capable, I think the better off we are.
I think you have a really great point, especially on the identity piece. I do want to pitch it over to Lakeisha if she has anything on that, because I know that's something she focuses on. You're on mute.
There we go. Yes. One thing that you said was truly amazing, for us to all connect together. Sometimes they don't understand us, but one thing is the true. We're always saying the same language. We're always about our core values. We're always speaking that. And we always want to make sure that's upheld wherever we are in the marketplace or at home. We want to do the same thing. Just being the leader that you are, what are some tools that you can share as far as us continue to build community in that way? Like, we want to build community, continue to do that and moving forward wherever we're at. So how can we continue to build community in the way that you were saying?
Well, I think one of the points you bring out is so true. So what do we learn in the Marine Corps? Our core values: honor, courage, and commitment, right? When I was hired at the city, I'm standing at HR waiting to do the in-processing, and they hand me my badge. And on the back, so the badge's got your picture and all the stuff that really goes on the back. The back of the badge was City of San Antonio's core values. So we have to understand that our civilian counterparts have also core values. And those core values are very similar to ours. They might execute them differently, but they're very, very similar to ours. The other thing, too, is our personal engagement with the members of our community. The more they get to know you, that at the end of the day, all of us are really basically civilians. We just happen to go another route. And so once they understand that they can, that we're not, a bunch of a bunch of bots, I think that is really important. The way that I have been able to be successful in my department, besides having some great people working for me, the all Air Force, by the way, having some great folks working for me and working with me, is that we get out in the community. And we get out in the community, and we not only speak, there's 43 generals in San Antonio, active duty, 43. And so I bring them in to see the mayor. We go out to see them. We take our members of council out to see them. We break down those communication barriers, and we break down the fact that, they're behind the fence. That doesn't do us any good. And when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, that had no fence. And in today's world, 85% of our active duty members live off installations. They don't live on installations. They live in our neighborhoods. And so that communication is really important. One of my jobs is to make sure that our communities understand each other. And, I use a lot of things. I use economic impact. Like during COVID, when I was at the Hispanic Chamber, I saw businesses fold and individuals go bankrupt, and it was horrible, horrible. But the 80,000 troops stationed in San Antonio and civilians never missed a paycheck. All the VA payments never missed a paycheck. All the billion-dollar construction projects never stopped. So that economic backbone is how I have our leadership pay attention, because out here it's not about the money. It's only about the money, which is okay. But that's how we break those barriers. And again, those are personal examples of what I do. But we really have to get out. It's leadership by walking around. I think that's really important. There's 500 retired admirals and generals in San Antonio. What I try to do is when there's a community issue that we need help from our government, especially our federal government, I bring them in. I call them. I write them. I said, can you please, your voice does count as a military member, and the civilian community will see that you still have influence. And I'm not talking political influence. I'm talking about influence about a lot of other things.
I think that's a great example that you're here working on bridging the gap here, because one of the things we talk about, General, is on the Veterans Club is how do we kind of eliminate or at least start reducing those veteran suicide rates that we're hearing about, veteran homelessness, because that's a big thing. It impacts us all. Even if we're not in that state, it still impacts us. That's one of the reasons why I founded the Veterans Club, is how do we find a way to reduce it? And it sounds like you are kind of bridging that gap between federal, state, and the community, and addressing the economic impact, right? Because that does impact the veteran community. So I think that's a great example.
One of the things, the caveat on what Jeffrey was saying is that you're looking in the community. Like initially when we first started a Veterans Club, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about, we need the DOD to fix this, and we need them to get this going, and all these programs are inefficient, and the government needs to do this. And then along the way, we recognize how many veterans are in the world doing things like you're doing, sir, like bridging those community gaps and kind of like amplifying this voice that we need more stuff. So as we've transitioned, we started to do more of this, more of, we can figure out ways as the veteran community to solve those issues, because we're already out here. A lot of us are already doing things. And I love that you are taking advantage of that veteran community of admirals and generals to be leaders again. And again, not politically or anything, but within the community, so that we can amplify those voices. Because the more that know, I think that's really the thing. I think there's still since there's such a small percentage of Americans that actually join the military, and not Americans, which we've also learned. There are so many non-American that have said, you know what, I'm going to serve this country, and they're not even citizens yet. So to do that, and then come out in the civilian world and then solve those issues, because that's what they've taught us to do, to protect and defend our communities, the Constitution, the people to our right and left, which was a big thing that we talked about earlier, right? It's those peer groups and those peer people to our right. So thank you for that. It actually shows that we are on the right track. So I appreciate that.
We are. So one of the briefs that I just gave a brief in Pittsburgh at the ICMA, which is International City Managers Association, and there was about 400 cities represented there, and a lot of them hosted military communities. And so they asked me to brief on the civil military gap. And that's what I did. I went and said, first of all, is there a gap? Yes, there is a gap. Civil military relations between our communities is a gap. And it's because only 1% of our population even thinks about it. And only about 30% is eligible because of whatever, a lot of reasons. But also, I briefed that it is important for us because not only because it's important to national defense, but it's important for us because our military men and women that are veterans are so civically minded. They contribute so much to the community. And our military, if you look at their contribution to GDP, to our economy, it's incredible. The number one job creator and employer in the United States is the government, the DOD. And so people have to realize that, and they have to realize that and the reason I do it is for them to support us when we're asking for things. And I hate to ask for things, but our military families, our military spouses are very underemployed, and that's why people get out, and that affects readiness. And so a lot of those things are very important, but to bridge that civil military gap, I think is very important. What you are doing, I think, is important too. We need to do that on a national level. I mean, we are also part of the social, historical, and economic fabric of how this country runs. And I think that we should have a big voice in it, bigger than we have now. Unfortunately, we had like 300 people in Congress back in '76 that were veterans. Now we have less than 80. And so that's also an important piece of it.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that we talk about here is if you look at our near peer competitors, their GDPs are growing. And why not give veterans that opportunity? I mean, you demonstrated yourself when you were interim Hispanic Chamber of Commerce CEO during the pandemic. You saw businesses folding, but you applied your leadership skills. Like, not everybody can just plug into a business and say, hey, oh, by the way, there's a world global crisis happening here. We need you to go and plug that hole in. But you stepped in so calmly based on those skills you learned in the service. Like, I think that's a valuable skill that a lot of civilians or even political leaders can tap into that. The veteran community is one of the most innovative that I give a Marine downtime, General. Watch what happens, right? They'll come up with some of the most creative things you can think of. So I just think that's a testament to your leadership and how you're able to plug in and plug that hole. What did that experience teach you being interim CEO, stopping the bleeding, if you will, and making sure that these families who have small businesses, because small businesses are the backbone of America, right?
Yep.
What did that teach you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And here, so I'm on a board called Visit San Antonio, which is bringing in tourists and tourism and into the city. And I sit next to a young lady who is very involved in the Hispanic Chamber. She's a business owner, big prominent in the city. And I recall that they were having problems with their CEO. And so they ended up firing the CEO and a lot of problems, but they had to fill the gap. This was before the COVID thing started. And she goes to my city manager. She called me first and she said, can you please take over for at least 6 months? And I said, I have two questions for you. One is, do you know I do have a job and I'm busy? And number two is, what the hell does a chamber do? And she says, I just need the leadership to tie this over until we find a new one. So I said, okay, Marines, they'll take a challenge. And so what it taught me, so I get there, and within 10 days, the mayor shut the city down. And our biggest fundraiser was we have a gala every year, make a lot of money on it because that's what nonprofits do. That was shut down. So so I reached back to my Marine Corps leadership skills. Number one, stay calm in a crisis. First and foremost, it's going to get better. Stay calm in a crisis. Number two, be visible, walk around, and don't panic. And you have to set the example of not to panic. And number three is be positive the entire time that you're there. And, coach your folks, be with your businesses, because these are all business owners. We had about 1,000 of them. So that happened. And I recall I started getting phone calls, my staff getting phone calls, and they started saying, we can't pay the dues anymore, we're out. We can't pay the dues anymore, we're out. I also spoke to the Hispanic Chambers of Commerce in the state of Texas. Half of them broke, they left. So business after business after business. And I kept telling them, and I told my staff, you're not going to take any of them off the rolls. Not a single one of them. We're going to keep marketing for them. We're going to keep working for them. We're going to keep doing them. What's the matter with you? Why are you doing this? I said, look, and this is what I learned in the Marine Corps. It is not about the money. It is not about the economic impact. It's always about the relationship. They'll come back. They'll remember this. I learned that. We do that in the Marine Corps. It's all about relationships. It's all about that. And they did come back. And so I learned that early on. The other thing I did is I picked up the phone, or I went to every single one of those businesses that I could. A lot of them had shut down already, but I talked to them, and I talked to them at length. And I said, look, what can we do? And we were running out of money. The other thing I learned is you have to make hard decisions. As a leader, you make some darn hard decisions. So the Marine Corps taught me that. And here's where I made the hard decisions. I had a staff. I couldn't pay the staff. So what did I do? And nobody's indispensable. And I hated to do this, but I had to sit down, and I didn't want to fire anybody. And so what I did is I just reduced salaries, and to include mine. I was the first one to go. That's the other thing. We last, right? We get paid last. Boom, my salary. I said no. So what I did is I took every one of the employees and brought them in. And then a couple of them I had to let go just because I couldn't. I had to look them in the eye, just like we do in the Marine Corps when you counsel somebody on a fitness report. Remember when they used to rank you? And, it was easy to tell the number one guy, your number gal, your number one. And then the number 5 guy, you had to sit there and say, well, you're 6 of 5. Not really, but you know what I mean. That was hard. And so all that came from my Marine Corps training and the ethos that I learned. And I did it in a very compassionate way. And so, I learned some lessons from the Marine Corps that I truly applied in this nonprofit and in the corporate world that invaluable. And I would have gotten through that. I spent 6 months there. The only caveat the city manager told me is you can't apply for the job. I said, why not? They pay more than you do. Anyway, and I'm not doing it for the money. But those are the lessons that I learned in the Corps. And now when I go to the galas or to the Hispanic chamber, they said, well, you saved the chamber. You saved the chamber. I said, no, I didn't save the chamber. The Marine Corps taught me these skills. And any Marine that would have sat in that chair would have done the same darn thing.
Powerful. I hope you guys are listening to that, ladies and gentlemen. He was able to apply his military skills into one of the most devastating global crises for his local community. And this is what we love about veterans here. They're more than just service members. They're political leaders, business leaders, government leaders. And if you give them that opportunity, watch what happens and they will go shine, right? And you were able to take an opportunity and salvage it, General. I think that just says a lot about your skill set and your experiences. As we get ready to wind down here, what's next for you? Like, do you have any goals planned for the next couple of years, or what are some things you want to kind of leave on your legacy? Because I think legacy is something that we like to talk about a lot, especially when we have, future generations that are looking to us for leadership and guidance.
Well, I mean, I'm getting long in the tooth here. My shelf life is getting shorter and shorter here. But there are certain things in my city, in the city of San Antonio, that I would like to accomplish that we started. We trademarked Military City USA. We're the only city that can officially say that. You have to ask us permission to use it if you're going to use it. And a lot of beer companies want to use it. And a lot of companies want to use it. The Spurs use it. But what it does is it highlights our city, and it's good for the city, and it's good for the employment of our city. It's good for the citizens of our city when we highlight our city like that. So we've accomplished that. But the other thing I want to do, my job is to make sure that those military missions that are essential to national defense stay here in San Antonio, that we don't get bracked, and they don't go away, and then we get new ones. That's why I take the mayor up to the Pentagon every year. We see the Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary, or whoever I've seen the Commandant of the Marine Corps, whoever is there. So that's my goal. The other goal I had, and I really wanted it because I loved when I hosted the Warrior Games in 2015, is that we got the Marine Corps to bring the Warrior Games because they alternate services in 2020. What happened? COVID. So we went up to the Pentagon 2 years in a row and said, look, we want the Warrior Games in San Antonio. Those are some of the most inspiring events that I have ever seen. Blind archers, triple amputee swimmers, double amputee bike rider. I mean, it was just incredible what we do for our military men and women that are wounded, ill, and injured. And they love it. They're back in the fight, man. They're back with each other. They don't care about the medals. You know what they care about? Each other. Just like us veterans. What do we care about? We just want to be with each other. Everything else is irrelevant. And so I get inspired and emotional in that because it's just incredible. If you have an opportunity to go to one of those things, go to it. But we've got the Army, who's now has all the Warrior Games, to bring them to San Antonio in 2026 and 2028. And so those are my big goals. I want to do more for military families. We spoke, and I convinced our city council and our city manager to apply hundreds of thousands of dollars every year from the city budget to fund fellowships. Now, this is tangible. This is, we love you and all this other. That doesn't mean anything. Fund, underlying money, fellowships for the spouses of military veterans and military active duty, fellowships and corporations. So a spouse goes to a corporation for 6 months for a fellowship. We pay for the fellowship, and then it's up to the company to hire them or not. So the first year that we did that, we had an 80% hiring rate, and from the companies like USAA, Valero, Amazon, Toyota, and the salaries that these spouses got was about $10,000 above the median income in the city of San Antonio. So I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, I go on and on, but I really want to leave that legacy here. And it's not for me. There's a lot of things that you start that we'll never cut the ribbon to. And, I was going to leave last year and I was asked to stay, but that saying I have is that, Arlington Cemetery is full of indispensable people. And so somebody's going to step up and take my place, take our place, and do a hell of a lot better.
Powerful words. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, if you guys are watching us right now, if you want to learn more about what, under the General's leadership, what the city is doing, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to the City of San Antonio website, and it'll take you to the Military and Veteran Affairs Department. You can see kind of all the great things you're doing. And what if some veterans want to kind of be a part of, this great initiative that you're doing, General? Can they reach out to your team?
They can reach out to me. They can reach out to my team. That's one of the things. When I was the installations commander, I had 30,000 folks in my command, and so I answered every email, and I used to get hundreds of them. I would answer every one of them, and I told folks all the time, that's leadership. You even if it's I'll get back to you or I forward it. Why? Because to the person that sent you that email, it's important to them, and they're thinking you're gapping them off, and you're not. And I think that and so I mean I'm staying a little soapbox here because I get upset at some of the folks that don't answer me. Oh, I'm too important. Now BS. Answer the note. Might not be your action, but at least the person on the other end was acknowledged because they're humans. And so they can contact me in directly. My email, it's out there. My phone number is out there, and I'll answer every one of them.
General, thank you so much for joining us here on the Veterans Club. Any closing comments?
No, I really appreciate the fact that you all are doing this, and thank you for what you're doing, and not only for the benefit of the Marine Corps, but the benefit of all our services, the benefit of all our veterans, our veteran families, or all our families. And no, I really appreciate it. And the only thing I would leave you all with is I was very fortunate to get where I'm at, but I didn't do it on my own. I did it with great support from great Marines, great families. And, we don't do this by ourselves. And, and I never forgot where I came from, though. That's the other thing that's really important. And so I think that is key. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that it's important to close that civil military gap, which I think you're doing. And I think we need to continue to do that because we're the 1%. They're the 99%. They pay our salaries. We live in their world, really. And so we still need to do that. And I'll recall this. And this is one thing, Joe, you'll never, you know what I mean? When you re-enlist, there's that little saying in the back, and it says, the Corps is proud to have you in its ranks. I am so proud to have you all in my ranks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. I hope you have a great, happy 249th birthday. Semper Fi. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you back on.
And Semper Fi, and hope to meet you all in person one day.
Semper Fi. Hey, I'm in San Antonio, sir. So if you're still doing Menudo tomorrow,